Well, folks, we are in a state of mourning today, and we will be for just a little while. We have definitely lost a legend. So yes, guys, if you recognize the music, it's the intro to Mr. Crowley. Yep, Ozzy Osbourne, I just found out yesterday. A lot of this is old news for a lot of you guys, but for me it was new as of last night. Found out that Ozzy Osbourne passed away, I think at the age of 74. So for a guy that lived the life that he lived quite a long life. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And the reason why is because me and the Ozman, we go back a long way. Now, a lot of you guys are going to be a little bit confused about what I'm talking about here, because you're thinking, okay, redneck and Penai. He's a redneck from Oklahoma. He probably listened to Merle Haggard and everything else all growing up. And I did. I listened to all those old country songs. But if you go back, there's a lot of 80s and late 70s, early 80s country music that just sucked. There's some good stuff thrown in there, but the stuff that played on the radio every day that, you had to listen to on the, when you're riding with your parents, because I was young back then, it was not the best stuff, right? And in my family, with my mom and dad and everybody, we listened to a little bit of everything. It wasn't just, old country or anything like that, Hank or whatever. We listened to everything. I can remember sitting back, growing up as a kid, and my mom, had, what was his name? Barry Manilow. That's who I was trying to think of. My mom would have Barry Manilow playing on the radio or the stereo in the house, and everything was still on vinyl records back in those days, right? So my parents listened to a little bit of everything, so that meant that I got to listen to a little bit of everything. And probably one of my favorite country singers back in those days was Ronnie Milsap, of all people. I really liked him. Not so much anymore, but I liked him back in those days. So I get into my early teens, and we had moved to Tuttle, Oklahoma, which is a small town southwest of Oklahoma City. Again, if y'all don't know this, I was one of the original gangsters of Tuttle wrestling. I'm pretty proud of that fact. But we lived in this small town of Tuttle. It's not quite so small anymore, but it was back in those days. And it really was small town living, and it was a great place to grow up. I moved there when I was in the 3rd grade from Moore, Oklahoma. That's where we lived before then. And I ended up becoming really good friends right away with a couple of twin brothers and another friend of theirs. And the twins were Timothy and Anthony, and then Byron was, they were all friends, and they had all been friends since kindergarten. And that's kind of the way it was in Tuttle. I was kind of the outsider for a little bit of a time, because I did not grow up with that original bunch in kindergarten. And, one of my viewers that has been watching my videos from the very get-go, Holly, I know she's one of the originals. She's one of the kindergarten ones. But anyway, I moved there in 3rd grade. At least I'm pretty sure that's the case. Anyway, I moved there in 3rd grade, and I became friends with Timothy and Anthony and Byron, and we were all best friends. We became best friends, hung out all the time. A lot of times it was hanging out at one of our houses or what have you. And we really got into heavy metal. We got into it, and it was heavy metal for the time, right? So Ozzy was about as hard as you could get at the time, Black Sabbath and early in those days. And of course, in 1982, he was known for biting the head off a bat There's a couple of stories out about that. Don't know if it was actually live or not. He thought it was a fake bat, and he ended up picking it up and biting the head off and realized it was a real bat. And the controversy arises that, was it dead or alive when he bit the head off of it? I don't know. But whenever you are young and you're like 12, 13 years old, or see, back then I would have been 13 in 1982. Yeah, we thought that was cool, Oh man, he bit the head off a bat. And so we enjoyed his music. But it was 1984 that, me personally, it was my very first concert ever of any venue there was, except for maybe going to like the Bald Knobbers or the Presley family in Branson, Missouri, right? This was my very first like real live concert. And it was at the Lloyd Noble Center on the campus of the University of Oklahoma in Norman. And of course, me and my friends were all 15 at the time. This is 1984. It was Ozzy's Bark at the Moon tour. And guess who was opening for Ozzy at the time? Motley Crue. Yes, I'm that old that Motley Crue is actually opening for somebody else. And that was the very first concert I ever went to. So, the memories of going to my first Ozzy concert was my very first concert, period, of any venue or any genre of music. So us being 15, none of us could drive. So we had to have a ride, right? And because the town we lived in was a good 45 minutes away from Norman. And it wasn't just an easy jaunt over there. So, and plus our parents didn't want us going. Not just, for 15-year-old boys, that you were not going to an Ozzy Osbourne concert without a chaperone. So we ended up having to cough up some money, and we ended up paying for a ticket for the twin brothers' father. And his name was Clayton. And Clayton was a very good man. I mean, great man. He was a good Christian man. And he was just one of those really soft-spoken, just a nice guy. Always was. And, of course, he passed many years ago with leukemia. But anyway, I still have a lot of fond memories of Clayton. And this is one of the funny ones. So he's our chaperone. He drives us to the concert, and we go to the concert, and he comes in with us, right? And so he's got earplugs in because he doesn't want to hear the loud music and all that kind of stuff. But as any of you guys know, when you're wearing earplugs, even noise canceling, which those didn't exist back in the day, you're going to hear some things. It's just not as loud, right? And so the concert starts off with Motley Crue. And we're like all excited. Everybody's all excited. And of course, back in the day, everybody's got their lighters up and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, you could probably smell a little bit of the green stuff, the green herb burning in the crowd and all that kind of stuff, right? Not us, but anyway, it was there. And so Motley Crue comes out on stage, and the very first comment out of their mouth, I can't repeat this, not on YouTube, but was something about, sexually pleasing a lady, orally. And it was a question, is how many of you guys like to do that? And I mean, the crowd freaking erupts. So you can only imagine what they actually said. The crowd erupts, everybody goes crazy, and then they start right into the shouted at the devil, and everything else. And so we listened to that, and of course, by the time they got done and Motley Crue did their set, everybody's really hyped up, having a good time. And of course, we're 15-year-old kids. We're not drinking, we're not smoking, we're not doing nothing. We're just enjoying the music, and that was kind of the pure fun of it all right there. Well, then Ozzy comes out, and of course, we've heard all the stories about Ozzy biting the head off a bat, and we're like, man, what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do in this concert? And this was the Bark at the Moon tour, so that was the songs he was playing off that album. And plus he had some of his old ones too. Even some of the Black Sabbath days, but it was a very good concert. Ozzy Osbourne never said one single curse word the entire concert. Not one single cuss word, not one single bad gesture, nothing. It was probably one of the cleanest concerts I've ever been to, except for maybe like George Strait or something. It was really kind of along the lines, really. I mean, nothing out of line said. It was just, hard rock music. That's all it was. But that was it. And, after Motley Crue had come out, and that was the very first words out of their mouth, we're thinking, oh, great, our chaperone's fixing to go. No, boys, we're out, no more of this. But Clayton was very patient, and he let us have our experience, which was cool. And back in those days, like even my parents did some of this, that devil music and everything else. And yeah, Ozzy was well known as the Prince of Darkness, and, back in his Black Sabbath days, he really had some dark stuff. Even later on, he had some dark songs. But one of our favorite songs was Crazy Train. That was one of our favorite songs. And let me just do this for you guys real quick. Let me read you the lyrics of Crazy Train if you don't know it. And it's almost like prophesying what we're going through right now in some cases. Okay, if you don't know, this is the song that starts off with all aboard, ha ha ha, and all that. So anyway, you've probably heard that, that beginning at football games, college football games, stuff like that. I've heard it at OU games and all that. But let's talk about the lyrics here. Let me read them to you. So it starts out and it says, crazy, but that's how it goes. Millions of people living as foes. Maybe it's not too late to learn how to love and forget how to hate. Mental wounds not healing. Life's a bitter shame. I'm going off the rails on the crazy train. Verse 2, I've listened to the preachers. I've listened to fools. I've watched all the dropouts who make their own rules. One person conditioned to rule and control. The media sells it, and you live the role. Mental wounds still screaming, driving me insane. I'm going off the rails on the crazy train. I know that things are going wrong for me. You got to listen to my words. Heirs of a Cold War, that's what we've become. Inheriting troubles, I'm mentally numb. Crazy, I just cannot bear. I'm living with something that isn't fair. And then it goes on, mental wounds. So anyway, you listen to the words, the lyrics of that song, and it's almost talking about today. Think about it. Heirs of a Cold War. And that's talking about my generation right there. I was in college when the Soviet Union fell. And at least for a little while, our fears of nuclear war were kind of subsided there for just a little bit. And we're kind of seeing an uptick in that again. But if you look at a lot of the other lyrics and the things he talks about in that song, millions of people living as foes. Why? Maybe we should learn how to love and forget how to hate. And so I think that is one song that, eventually Ozzy later on in life, he became a pretty good guy, at least to a point. Here's the deal, man. And this is something that's always befuddled me, right? Like my old man, my dad, and my grandparents and so on, they were good folks, hardworking, just worked hard all their lives. My dad's only vice was food. I mean, he loved his barbecue and things like that, right? Well, my dad didn't even live to make it into his 70s. He died at 69. But my dad never did drugs. He drank very, very little in his life because it was forbidden in our house. My mom wasn't going to have it. I'm not saying he never did it, but it was very, very small amounts. And just hardworking folks never did any of that stuff. And then you got guys like these rock stars that freaking burnt their brains up with all kinds of drugs. And, you know, and Ozzy was one of them. He definitely did that. But just completely smoked their brains out with every kind of drug that they could get their hands on back in the day. And here they are living well into their 70s, if not their 80s. I'll never understand that, why good people who are just hard workers, just good folks, don't get a chance to live a little bit longer life and a more fulfilling life, and at least live long enough to spread their wisdom and their good naturedness down to other generations. But instead, it's these people that have just absolutely gone bonkers, done drugs, done all kinds of crazy stuff through their lives. They're the ones that become idols and make millions being idols, and really kind of being a bad influence. And they also live these long, fulfilling lives. I've really just never understood that. But again, just like his song says in Crazy Train, life isn't fair, right? That's just the way it goes. So yeah, that was our story. And so we ended up going home after that. And yeah, we were like one of the first kids in school to say, yeah, we went to go see Ozzy and everything else. Nobody else went to it because we were like really the only cool kids in our school. You know, back then everybody was too busy listening to, you know, Michael Jackson and, you know, some of these other groups out there. I can't even remember, Duran, maybe. I don't even know, guys. I didn't even listen to a lot of that pop music back then. Just didn't listen to it. I didn't like it either. And that's how we ended up becoming big time Ozzy fans. Well, we went to that concert, and that led on to Ronnie James Dio, went to a couple of their concerts. And then later on, I kind of dropped that when that era of heavy metal kind of went away. And it started kind of going the way of like Limp Bizkit. And I'm not saying Limp Bizkit's bad or anything like that, but I just kind of lost interest in it. And that's when I went kind of totally country there for the longest time. Now, what's so funny is here I am living in the Philippines, and really I don't have like radio stations and stuff like that to listen to. There are some that you can get sometimes, but they're playing Filipino music. So really about all I have is like YouTube music or something like that to even try to keep up with current music in the United States. And every once in a while we'll see some stuff on Netflix or whatever, but you know, I'm so far behind in the music scene when it comes, you know, from what's going on back in the Western world, I don't really know. Because here in the Philippines, yeah, you know, the kids, they keep up with a lot of the American stuff, the Western stuff. But really, when you go out and you go do karaoke and all that, they're still singing a lot of 80s music, which is cool for me. I love it because I know those songs. And so, yeah, I used to not listen to a lot of that pop 80s music back then. I was more into Ozzy. But now that I'm living here in the Philippines and you hear it doing karaoke and all that, I've kind of got into that a little bit. You know, I remember the songs. I remember them playing on the radio. And so it's kind of fun to go back and kind of sing those songs or whatever. But really, a lot of these Filipinos know more 80s songs than I know, because I was putting in the cassette tape in my the stereo on my truck, and I was trying not to listen to like KJ 103. Now, we had a good radio station in Oklahoma City area called the Cat, K-A-T-T, 100 FM. I don't even know if it's still there or not, or they're still any good. But at the time, that was a good one. And you could listen, you know, every once in a while, you'd get a little Ozzy on there, and you definitely get some of the better, I guess, more hard rock kind of music. So, again, that's what I listened to, or I just popped in a cassette tape. Yeah, I'm that old. And then finally, you know, I had a whole tray of cassette tapes. They got stolen down in Altus, Oklahoma. But that was about the time when DVDs started coming out, or CDs, not DVDs, CDs started coming out. So we were all kind of switching over. But Anyway, guys, there's my Ozzy Osbourne story. I hope you enjoyed the video. You know, maybe you'll know a little bit more about me. That, yeah, some of us rednecks, we listen to more than Merle Haggard. We listen to more than, you know, Keith Whitley and some of these others. We listen to a little bit of Ozzy, and God rest his soul. I hope everything, you know. Anyway, we're still in a state of mourning here, here in the Philippines for Ozzy, and you know, hey, that's just the way it's going to be here for a little bit until, you know, they lay him to rest or whatever. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.